Welcome to this new section of the Photoshop course. This section is about creating shapes. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into the shape tools that we've seen before, and we're also going to learn about creating custom shapes with the pen tool and the curvature tool, and a lot of cool stuff coming up in this section. So just a brief overview of how to create a shape in Photoshop. You probably saw this in a previous lesson, but you have your shape tool down here. So if you click and hover over it, you have a rectangle, rounded rectangle, which is a rectangle with rounded corners, an ellipse, a polygon, and a line tool, and then also this custom shape tool. Let's go ahead and take the rounded rectangle tool for fun. And we've got our color up here of the fill, which is the inside. Our stroke is turned off. Let's actually go ahead and turn on our stroke. And you can see, as we saw before, we have different views for our colors. So you have previously used up here, recent colors, and also you can click in this color picker box to open up the color picker window, and you can pick a specific color. So say we want a black stroke, we can check that. Also notice there are a couple other options for the type of color at the top. We saw this white with a red slash through it. That means it's no color, meaning that it's going to be transparent or not there, and you can choose that for the fill or the stroke. This next one is a solid color. So that's if you want a color. This next one is a gradient. So we'll look into that in just a minute. And then this last one is a pattern. There are some pre-built patterns that you can use here, but you can also download or create them yourself. So let's just choose our solid color, our black. These settings for the width and height, so if you have a specific width and height in mind, say 100 pixels by 50 pixels, then you can actually create a shape that's exactly that shape. So if you just go down into your canvas and then click OK, it's going to create that shape for you. Of course, you can also just go ahead and, all right, so let me undo that. And you can also create a shape just by clicking and dragging to any sort of custom size or width that you want. You'll see the aspect up here in width and height as well. The next buttons are more options. So this next one is what will happen when you create a new shape. So will there be a new layer? Will it combine with the previous shape that you've created? You can subtract, intersect, exclude. So let me show you those really quick. So if we create a new shape, just like so, you can see that it created this new layer. If we have it on combine shapes, you can see that it actually combines these shapes and the stroke goes around the edge. So you can create some custom shapes that way. So say we go to subtract, and if you have a shape layer selected, it's going to automatically actually subtract from that layer. Let's undo that. And say we want to subtract from the inside, you can just click from the inside of a shape and it will subtract from there. We can also show you intersect. So if we have two shapes that are intersecting, it will create a shape within the intersection of the lines or the shapes that you are creating. So you can create something pretty interesting there. Or exclude, which is kind of the opposite of the intersection. So play around with these. You can see that you can create some super custom shapes that way. There's a couple more advanced options I'm going to skip right now. Radius, though, is important, especially if you're using the rounded rectangle tool. This is going to adjust the radius or the curve of your edges. So a higher radius in pixels will have a more curved edge. As you can see, if I zoom in here, you can see that this top shape has a more curved edge with that 50 pixels radius, whereas the bottom one has the I believe it was a 10 pixel radius. All of these things can be changed once you create a shape by going back to the shape tool, and you can adjust them. So say we want a thicker stroke, we can do that. You have to have the shape selected in your layer panel to do that. If you want to change the shape style to dashes, for example, you can do that. If you want dashes, but you want more dashes, note that you need to decrease the number or the size. You can also adjust with more options how it looks. So say you want a larger gap between the dashes or a smaller gap. You can create a dash width. You can create sort of a multiple style gap. So let's actually create a higher gap. So now let's do a dash, a 2 dash, then a 1 dash, a 2 dash, then a 1 dash. So you can kind of really go crazy with how custom this is. And then also these options above, align caps and corners. This will make more sense if you're drawing just a line in terms of the caps, but for a line, right now it's on the inside edge of the shape. You can see here, if we zoom in, see how these dots are on the inside of the shape? If we go back to our stroke setting, which you can get to right here, you can put it on the line itself or outside the line. So again, if you want to create some sort of, like this would be a cool little marquee sign if we change the stroke color to something like a yellowish. And then we have the inside of the stroke or the shape be maybe like a white. And then we can type in some text. Let's add a dark background to this. So let's just add a black background. And there you have our marquee sign in the works. We'd have to add some text and stuff. But see, you can get pretty creative with these shapes. Now let's go over the different shape fill options really quickly, but let's choose a different type of shape. So we've seen the rectangle and ellipse tool. I want to show you the polygon tool, which is a cool way to create a perfectly symmetrical polygon with however many sides you want. So you have all the same sort of options up here at the top that we saw before, but we also have this sides option. So if you want a polygon with 3 sides, what's that? That's a triangle. So if you create that shape right there, you have a 3-sided polygon. Say we want a hexagon, we can create that just like so. And so that's a cool way to quickly create a custom shape or whatever shape you want with equal sides. Let's look at the fill options for these shapes really quick. So let's go to this triangle right here. And in the fill options, you saw that we have a gradient option. So by clicking that, let me move this over to the side so you can see it. You see that we now have this gradient going from dark to light, so black to white from the bottom to the top of this shape. To change the color of the gradient, double click this little box at the bottom left of the gradient and then choose a different color. So now we have red. And then to change the top one, you can double click that white little box, or it was white for me, and change it to something else. You can even create a new color point wherever you want in this line, and this will actually make a 3-color gradient, right? So it goes from red to blue to purple. You also have some presets up here that you can choose. Underneath these folders, you have even more presets. I mean, gradients are actually kind of popular now. It's funny, up until the past year or so, I would say gradients were seen as something of the past, something from like the 90s. But now a lot of people are using gradients in their graphic design. Now, note there's these other boxes at the top of this gradient bar. If you double click these, you'll see, or just click them, you'll see that it's the opacity 100%. And so if we set this to 0, for example, what happens? It makes it white. And so kind of like we've seen in our layer masks, the white is when this is set to white, actually, it's set to 0% opacity. And when it's set to black or 100%, it's 100% opacity. I accidentally created another point, and to get rid of a point, just drag it off to the side. So you can actually change the opacity. Now, when would that actually come in handy? So say we have some sort of social media graphic. I'm going to delete these shapes. We're going to take our rectangle tool, create a rectangle at the bottom of our canvas. We're going to change the fill to a gradient. And for the top part of the gradient, we want this to actually be opaque. Or transparent rather. So we're going to change the opacity to 0. So now we see that this actually fades, and let's turn off the, well, first let's turn off the stroke for this layer. We don't want a stroke. And now you can see that without the background on, we have this transparent gradient from the bottom to the top. So say we had some text. We're going to look at text in the next section, but say we have some text here for our name, for example, and you're putting this over a video card or something like that. You're creating some sort of video graphic. It might be nice to have some sort of gradient transparency at the bottom that fades into the video, so the top is completely transparent, but the bottom has a little bit of opaqueness so you can see the title card better. So that is a more practical demonstration of why you would use that sort of transparent gradient. Really quickly, just if we go back to our fill colors and let's set this back to 100, you could change the direction of the gradient by changing this, turning this dial right here. Think of it as 360 degrees, and it's the angle. So if you want something diagonal, you can change it. You could also change it from a linear gradient that goes from one side to the other to a radial, which goes from the inside to the out. Angle, which kind of is like a clock. It goes from, it's like a circle, and it goes from one point all around the clock, all the way to the other. Reflected, diamond, they just do different styles. Now, also say you have, let's go to this radial one, but say that this circle is too small, you want it to be bigger, you can adjust the scale. So see how we have this scale drop down right here. You can increase or decrease the scale, and you could do this for any of these. So for linear or radial, and this can help you blend the gradient, make it a little bit smoother. Depending on the color choices, I would say like a harsh gradient, something like this doesn't look that good, but maybe if you have the scale up a little bit, it'll look even better. So that's the option for that. Let me just show you really quick. If we select our pattern, this is pretty cool. You can create patterns or add patterns. If there's patterns that you often use, you can actually import patterns by clicking this gear icon right here, clicking import patterns, and then finding a pattern from, or really just like an image file from your computer, and it will actually save it and create a pattern for you that you can use. And this is great if you're constantly using a similar kind of style or pattern for your graphic designs. All right, so this is a lot with shapes, but we're going to dive a little bit deeper into creating more custom shapes in the next lesson. And then, of course, at the end of this section, you'll have a fun project to create a social media graphic using shapes. All right, see you in the next lesson.